Hello and welcome to this Monday's weekly market briefing. We've got lots to talk about, but firstly, Kamala Harris raises $200 million in first week of presidential campaign, as well as that foreign officials race to de-escalate tensions after Golan Heights attack, and finally, US and Japan warn of China threat as they upgrade their military alliance. We've got lots to talk about on the charts, also with lots happening on the economic calendar, but we'll come to that near the end, so make sure you stay around so you can see that. Before we get straight into it though, make sure to subscribe. The first article to talk about is to do with Kamala Harris and her fundraising campaign. Now, the new Democratic presidential candidate nominee, Kamala Harris, has now raised $200 million for her new campaign to take the White House this summer. This offers new hopes to her and her campaign team, who now look at this surge in funding as a serious sign that she has a great chance at beating the popular Donald Trump. Now, of course, we've been following this topic, we've been following the presidential campaign for how long it's so far gone on for, and obviously we were covering it going back into the invisible primaries even before the primary period for both the Democrats and Republicans. And obviously the topic of primaries is a very interesting topic when we're talking about Kamala Harris specifically, because of course Biden did win the Democratic primary, and whilst Kamala Harris could argue that she does have the same mandate as she was the VP that ultimately was side by side with Biden, and therefore when Biden was elected through the primaries, she was therefore elected as well. But ultimately some are arguing, of course, that really Kamala Harris has got in there without actually having to do the same work or prove herself to voters as we might see in another primary period. The last time we of course saw a serious primary take place was probably going back to Joe Biden's last primary in 2020, as whilst you could say Donald Trump was the last, really he was the favourite, the massive favourite from the start. He never even attended one of those primary debates. So whilst Nikki Haley was up there, really she was just representing the kind of more centrist, moderate, right part of the party, the Republican Party, and never kind of stood that fighting chance. And as a result, we really haven't seen a primary take place since 2020, when of course Joe Biden went ahead. Ultimately, though, skipping on from the topic of the primaries, it is very interesting talking about the fundraising period, as we heard a great deal of donors basically call for Biden to drop out. That was a kind of key thing, a key issue, that Biden was facing following his debate with Donald Trump, where many people were able to see firsthand that he didn't have the competency that he maybe had 4 years ago, or even before that when he was with Obama. And really just the age, as he's got older, he just hasn't got that kind of same cognitive ability, it seems like. And then more rumours and more news articles start to come out highlighting certain key worries, really, to do with, Biden's mental functions, as ultimately, dementia professionals had been, visiting him over the past year whilst in the White House. And, as we saw following the debate as well, when he tried to, introduce Vladimir Zelensky, at the NATO summit, I believe it was, he did then introduce him as Putin, which of course is, not something that you want to do when you're trying to represent, Ukraine or support Ukraine in their fight against Russia. So, many things started to stand out. Biden was really struggling, but donors was a key thing that he struggled with. It was Nancy Pelosi and George Clooney, who, the two of them have, really pushed a lot of the donor efforts. They've, organised a great deal of conferences and meetings to allow donors to come along and meet candidates and then, offer some money. And ultimately, it was those two that ended up dropping their support for Biden, which was kind of the last straw, it seemed like, as at that point we started to see that Biden doesn't have the support of donors. Without the support of donors, you really can't get far in American politics. Year on year, or not year on year, but every 4 years, if you kind of look at the data, it's seemingly becoming more and more expensive to run a campaign. They're spending more and more money, and as a result, donors are becoming a more and more value. And so, it is kind of hard to see how Biden would have been able to push forward without, strong donors, and that's why it seems like he has now dropped out. With Kamala Harris, obviously now having raised $200 million within her first week. It is her first week though, so it'll be questionable to see. It'll be an important question to ask to see how she'll continue to fare with donations coming over the next few weeks leading up to the election. As you could raise a lot of money in the first week when all the hype surrounding you, but as campaigns then press on, you lose those donors. So we'll see what does happen, but she's got a great deal of cash now in the war chest to go ahead against Donald Trump, no matter what happens. So it'll be very interesting to see how this does play out. With her predecessor and former boss Joe Biden encountering a dramatic donation slowdown following his extremely poor performance in a debate against Trump, Kamala has noted that she raised more in a week than what Biden and Trump have been able to do throughout the month of June combined. Since Biden only raised $63.8 million in the last month, which is $42 million less than Trump. In total, the Trump campaign and its associates have raised $757 million up and until the end of last month, with $431 million raised between April and June. Biden in comparison had raised $746 million up until the date that he quit the race. Kamala has been very successful thus far in uniting the Democratic establishment and voters behind her candidacy, despite her bypassing the democratic process offered by the primary period. Currently, she is vetting her vice presidential nominees and is now expected to announce her VP choice within the coming week. So we'll definitely stay updated on that one and keep you guys notified, but also at the same time try and stay up to date with the news just during the trading days as well, as it takes some time of course for me to then make these videos and catch up on the news for what's happened on the previous day and that kind of thing. So it's obvious to say, but definitely stay updated on this topic. Very important indeed, because it does affect investors' perceptions on the future economy with the different economic policies proposed and that kind of thing. So definitely keep your eyes on this topic. Next to talk about though is more on the topic of world tensions. We're returning to a kind of region and a topic that we haven't actually spoken about in quite some time, but previous to that we had spoken about it quite a lot, and that is of course the kind of wars in the Middle East at the moment, the tensions within the Middle East, especially surrounding Israel, Hezbollah, Gaza with Hamas, and then also the Houthis in Yemen. So there's kind of been a massive fallout from all those kind of individual conflicts and skirmishes, and now it's starting to boil up greater and greater to levels that many are warning of a potential regional war, with foreign diplomats and politicians now attempting to de-escalate the growing tensions between Israel and Hezbollah following a recent rocket attack. This rocket attack seemingly came from Lebanon into Israel's Golan Heights, with 12 civilians killed as a result of the attack. Now, ultimately, as I said at the start, we've been covering this topic in great detail, and going back to the October the 7th attack, we've been covering it since then. Now, on the topic of Israel and Hezbollah specifically, obviously we've been warning of a potential regional war for quite some time. Now, whilst some would say, well, because you've been warning of it so long, because the media is always talking about it and nothing's happened, you could kind of write it off, you could kind of be more calm about it. But ultimately, whilst nothing has happened, the skirmishes are still taking place day after day, and the threats being made by Hezbollah and the kind of plans being laid out by Israel are still very real. It's less of will this happen and more of when. And so whilst this has kind of been a key topic for quite some time, it's certainly something that you can't just write off and say, well, it's over and we won't really see this continue, or there isn't actually a risk of a regional war. as when we did see the kind of back and forth missile attacks between Iran and Israel, many were especially worried about regional war then, because then you have the two greatest powers really within the Middle East going head to head, sending their military forces to attack one another. Ultimately, nothing came of that. It's seemingly, both sides wanted some form of de-escalation without presenting themselves as looking for de-escalation. But at the same time, de-escalation was somewhat achieved. But what we're now seeing play out is Iran continuing to kind of push their hawkish foreign policy on Israel by using their proxy network, of course, that being the Houthis in Yemen, where Israel recently struck, and then also, of course, Hezbollah in Lebanon, where skirmishes are taking place, and now we're looking at potential Israeli invasion into Lebanon to take on Hezbollah. So, of course, we'll keep you updated on this topic, with Israeli leaders now vowing to violently retaliate against Hezbollah, who Israel have been going back and forth with over the course of the past 9 months or so. Hezbollah, however, has denied any responsibility for the rocket attack. Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant said that on Sunday, Hezbollah was behind the attack despite the attempts to hide that fact. Gallant went on to warn Hezbollah that there will be a heavy price for their actions. The wartime Israeli cabinet has authorized Netanyahu and Gallant to decide what course of action will now be used to retaliate. US officials, however, have said that US officials do not want any further escalation. So, there is this kind of seemingly, a retaliation will take place, but ultimately at the same time, diplomats are working to prevent that. So we'll see what does happen, and of course, as I said, we'll keep you updated. That's all to talk about in this article, though. Last article to talk about is still on topic of world tensions, but this time in the Indo-Pacific region, where of course we talk about all the time with China on the rise and the potential of a conflict sparking there as well. Now, Japanese and US officials have now outlined their most significant upgrade to their joint military alliance since 1960. This comes as Western allies in the Pacific region warn of China's aggressive posture to national sovereignty and integrity of democracy in the region, with Antony Blinken, Lloyd Austin and their their Japanese counterparts discussing during a bilateral meeting on Sunday how China employs a mixture of political, economic and military coercion of countries, companies and civil society. Blinken at the start of the meeting said that we see the US and Japan side by side in so many places where it matters around the world. The FD has reported that in their new agreement, it provides a landmark upgrade to the US's military command structure in Japan and will ultimately put more operational control into the hands of the locally based US command. The coordination between the two allies had for some time been a struggle, since the US command in Japan had lacked the authority to control their 50,000 troops deployed there, which is a very large amount when you consider the size of European armies. Now, a 3-star US commander and extra staff will hold powerful positions in Japan, and their joint force headquarters will be readjusted to allow for more seamless integration. So, very important topic there to round off the articles, as this is something that we're always talking about because it's affecting world tensions and therefore affecting those key assets such as gold and even US indices, as of course volatility with world tensions massively impacts markets. So a very important topic there that we've covered, and definitely stay up to date with any of these topics that we've covered thus far. That's all to talk about in the articles, though. Next to talk about, like always, is the charts, where to begin with we are on the US 30, the Dow Jones, where some interesting things are playing out, as of course we ended off last week with price reacting to that 6180 Fibonacci retracement level, which I did reference as an area which we could see price swing from and move to the upside, and that is seemingly what we're seeing play out right now, with price on the upswing. The question will be, though, of course, whether price will, as we've seen previously with the kind of classic Fibonacci retracement pattern, will we see price react to this 6180 as we already have and continue this move to the upside to reach those Fibonacci extension levels around the 42,000 level? And that's the kind of key question to ask. At the moment, it seems like we do have a great deal of volatility, a great deal of strength, with price pushing to the upside, but it will be a question of whether that can be maintained, of course, starting off the week with the great deal of economic data that we are receiving this week, which could of course cause price to trade sideways like we sometimes see. Next to talk about though is the dollar, where not much can really be said. Price is stagnated, stalling out, not much is really happening, and price has stayed within this range now that's formed since the 19th of July. Arguably, of course, you could say this range started back around the 11th of June. But ultimately, we saw that false breakout to the downside, and so since then, it's been around 10 days or so. The price has remained within this range that has formed, bouncing between these two areas of liquidity, but really not doing much. So it'd be interesting to see whether the price will break out of this range this week. As I said, we're receiving a great deal of very important dollar data, very important US data this week. So possibly that's the kind of thing that it needs to kind of push it over the edge, but we will see. Next about is Euro USD, where once again not much is happening because it is paired with the dollar, which not much is happening with. And at the moment, Euro USD is just kind of sitting within this area of liquidity. So not representing key zones really, or kind of forecasting any key moves to come, and we really will just have to see what plays out for the first day of the week for Euro USD before we can then start to make any key analysis points. The only thing that we could possibly say is if we start to draw out this bearish Fibonacci retracement tool, is should we see a reversal in the market? Those are the kind of key levels which we could see a reversal from, this continued reversal to the downside as price then starts to make lower highs. So we will see how this does play out. Definitely keep your eyes on Euro USD though. Next to talk about is pound yen, which of course has fallen off a cliff over the past week or so, as a result of new yen news and new yen intervention and that kind of thing, as we did see price fall off from the monumental high, record high levels of kind of 208, and now price is all the way down near 198. So a massive swing to the downside. If we just bring out the pips there, from top to bottom really, what is that? 1,200 pips, which is just absurd. Considering that took place over what was basically just a week. That is the kind of volatility we're currently seeing on pound yen, and the question will be now whether we'll kind of retrace somewhat before we then continue further to the downside, or in fact, are we actually seeing a retracement play out now, and are we then going to be ready to swing and continue to the upside? So definitely keep your eyes on pound yen. Very interesting indeed. Next talk about is Bitcoin, where price is really kind of stalling at these at this kind of key liquidity zone. So price did react to that 78.60 ending off last week on Thursday. In that morning market briefing going into Friday, I did say how the question would be whether it could end off pushing above and breaking out of this period that had seemingly formed and break out this this area to break above this level, this key resistance level. We haven't seen that play out though, and instead prices reacted to that key liquidity zone, kind of somewhat sold off, and is still remaining below. So the question still remains, as we asked last week, whether price can break above this liquidity zone and move higher, or in fact will price stay below it. Next to talk about though is gold, which is retraced back on those sell-off moves that we have seen take place over the past week or so, the past few weeks. So since Wednesday the 17th, we really saw this sell-off to the downside, where then price stalled around this key area of liquidity, if I can remember correctly, and then we saw this swing back to the upside, this somewhat retracement to the upside before then a continued swing to the downside. Now interestingly, price found its bottom around this previous range, this previous period of price action and consolidation, where then price swung back again to the upside, retraced back again to the upside, is now seemingly reacting to this once key area of support, but now key area of resistance. So it'll be a question of whether price will now sell off from this 2,400 level, which of course is a very, very important psychological level. So definitely keep price on gold. Last to talk about is oil, which is forming a double bottom, and of course definitely keep your eyes on oil at the moment with the tensions in the Middle East. That's all to talk about on oil, though, as we have seen, somewhat of a retracement onto that Fibonacci retracement level, but nothing's really come of it once again. That's all to talk about, as I said, though, on the charts. Last to talk about is the economic calendar. We're receiving quite a bit of economic data, so we'll go through that quite fast. Firstly, we're receiving the Eurozone's German and Italian GDP growth rate figure, followed by the German inflation rate figure. Followed by that, we're receiving the US consumer confidence figure, as well as the Aussie inflation rate figure. Followed by that, we're receiving the Chinese manufacturing figure, and then the Bank of Japan's interest rate decision. And then following up on that, we're receiving the Eurozone and Italian inflation rate figure. So some very, very important Eurozone data coming up this week, as well as, Asian data. We're receiving lots of, Bank of Japan data, and also obviously Chinese data, so definitely listen out for all of that. Followed by that, though, arguably most important for the week, we're seeing the Fed's interest rate decision, and their press conference will definitely be covering that one. And then following that, we're seeing the Bank of England's interest rate decision, so a massive week for pound yen as well. And ending off the week, though, like always, we're receiving not like always, but a very important piece of data nonetheless, the US NFP figure, the non-farm payrolls, which once again we'll be covering this time next week on Monday, as of course we will recap what happens on Friday then. But that's all to talk about on the economic calendar. We've got lots in the articles, lots in the charts, and lots in the economic calendar. It'll be a great trading day and great trading week. I'll be back with you tomorrow, but that's all from us at Wildwood Capital. Have a great one. See you later.